Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Saturday, everybody.
This feels like old times, Sherry.
Isn't it?
It's
It
very
feels
nice.
good.
It's been far too long
Yeah,
since you and I have done a live stream together on a Saturday morning.
I know. This is the shoe that fits,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It
Yeah.
totally does. There's a shoe that fits, so we wear it, Nate.
All right.
Yeah.
We have
Um,
nobody watching it yet because we didn't announce it ahead of time.
well, I did schedule it. I scheduled it 2 hours ahead.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah.
it's Saturday morning. People
Yeah.
are
Saturday
watching
morning.
people are watching Looney Tunes.
Usually there's like usually I mean in the I guess it's maybe because we've been so inactive with our streams lately, but it
Yeah.
used to be that there'd be like 28 to 30 people right at the start of any stream.
Really?
Pretty reliably. Yeah, pretty
Wow.
reliably. I
I
noticed the last video I did, the views were way down too. I think killing my Twitter was probably a mistake for the channel, but it was not a mistake for me.
Good. Oh, you
So
did? Oh, that's
oh
very
yeah, it's permagon now. I
really?
actually, yeah, because I actually, okay, when I saw how low the views were for my last video compared to normal, I kind of panicked and it's like, okay, maybe I should put this out on Twitter. And so I went to recover my account and it was too late. It's already permanent. It already got queued for perma deletion. So
Well, here's
um,
here's the thing,
God
though.
protected me from myself,
Yeah,
giving it in my moment of weakness.
and the
So
other thing too, Nate, is that, you've been going through quite a bit of stuff on
yeah,
your end. You've been busy, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
like with South Estuary and work and
yeah,
all that. I mean, we have lives, right? You have a life, I have a life.
yeah. We do have,
And the
yeah.
channel has kind of just been a little bit on the quieter
It
side.
Yeah, it has been quiet. I
Yeah.
and actually, yeah, I actually almost recorded a solo video for members this morning, which is terrible. By the way, for anybody who's a member of this channel, God bless you. I haven't given you anything to make it worth your while in quite some time. I'll try to remedy that, I promise. Um,
Well,
one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to share updates on some of the projects that I have going that have kept me from doing more Grill Country stuff. I'll share that with the members, and to try to make it up to
Mhm.
not having given it up. But I almost recorded an update this morning, and that was going to be about like that. I expect to do less frequent Grill Country videos going forward,
Really?
although I might do more members videos because I do have another project that I'm working on that I'm invested in that I probably will share with the members. But I'm not gonna stop. I'll probably do like maybe 1 to 2 videos a month instead of I used to do 1 to 2 a week. So it's gonna be less frequent. But I hope that the quality of the videos that I do come out will be better and make it worth your while. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm hoping.
Um,
That's the goal. But I
well, the
can't. I just don't have the bandwidth to do it as frequently. The reading load is a lot because like I actually like read all of these books that are often quite difficult books, like very closely and very carefully, and it's very time consuming. And I have other projects that I'm working on that I just don't have. I was reading at the peak of Girl Country when we we're most active. I was reading something like 6 hours a day.
yeah, I know. I know, it's insane.
So yeah, and I just can't. I don't have that time for that anymore.
Mhm.
So
That's understandable.
yeah.
Totally
And
understandable.
I don't. One of the things reason that's changed is because of my health. I
Yeah.
used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every
Yeah.
morning. I can't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning anymore.
No.
So I
No.
don't have that 3 hour window before my workday starts at 7 a.m. to read every day like I used to.
It's okay.
So
There's a
yeah,
season for everything, Nate, as
yep,
they say, as
yep,
the Bible says.
yeah, yep.
Um, yeah, well, we're actually going to continue on fairy stories. What did you
Yes,
say we had? 41 pages done?
41 pages. Yeah, the PDF, PDF copy I have is 41 pages, and this is our 8th episode. I want to say, is that
I'm
right?
not even sure.
8 or 9. I know
Yeah.
it's more than 7. Um, And we have covered, so we've covered an average of like what? That's about 3 to 4 pages per episode.
Well,
Because
I'm a
and it's
slow.
because it's dense. It's really dense. Like Tolkien is saying a lot in this essay. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's. I kind of anticipated this at the beginning. When we started out, I did say that we were probably going to take this is going to be a long series, even though it's a short essay.
Yeah.
Because the density of what he's talking about is pretty incredible, and there's a lot of things that are worthy of expanding upon and reflecting on.
Yeah, and I like to go slow personally. I like
Yeah.
to just take it really, really just, enjoy
Yep.
it.
Absolutely.
So maybe I'll just start reading where I said we would start.
Yep.
Hey,
I'm
good morning,
tracking.
Cody. I'm gonna I don't know, like since this is a live stream, I'm all about hi Zep. I'm all about participation, Nate.
Yeah.
That's why I like to do live streams because it's a now thing. It's happening. Which reminds me of an Agnes Obel song that I really love. It's happening, it's happening, it's happening, it's happening. But anyway, so it might be fun to just drop a link right now, and if
Why not?
Cody wants to jump in, because it's a read through, so
yeah, there's no reason why other people can't contribute their thoughts too, because we're reading through the text,
right,
and we're reacting to the text that's been put before us, so there's no reason why other people can't join. I'm totally fine with that.
And we don't know anything anyway.
No, I agree.
We're just surmising, right?
I'm just giving you the best that I can muster.
Same here. So if you guys, if anybody wants to join us, please, you're more than welcome.
All right.
Okay. So here we go. So when we left off, we think this is where we left off. Okay. So there might be a bit of a repeat from
It's been a while because we were all busy preparing for Southeastuary. So this was on a long hiatus. So this is our best guess of where we left off.
Yeah. And so I remember being really perplexed about his take on Shakespeare and talking with you about that. So that's why I think this is where we left. But I'll start here.
Yeah, I know well, it's interesting he's talking about Macbeth here, because one of the things that I know about Tolkien and Macbeth is that the reason he wrote the scene where the Witch King of Angmar is killed the way he did is that was his jab at Shakespeare, because he thought his answer to to not a man of woman born was pretty lame. The whole Caesarean answer was not satisfactory to Tolkien. So he had Eowyn kill the Witch King. That was literally inspired by Shakespeare, but in a negative way, because he hated the way Shakespeare handled it.
I'm just gonna do yeah, I don't know who that person is, so I'm not adding them in.
If you show yourself on camera and let us see your face and wave and smile, we'll probably go ahead and give it a shot. I don't mind getting new people in, but
and you got 3 seconds. 1, 2.
It might. I'm wondering what is Evgeny's wife's name? Is that him?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and gone. So, what was I going to say? Oh, I wanted to just say that Barfield wrote a series of essays called, and you're familiar with, Romanticism Comes of Age, because
I started a series on that book of essays with Michael at one point.
I know,
and we did we did a good chunk of it.
Yeah,
we never quite finished, but we did a good chunk of them.
Well, there's an interesting thing with that. Coleridge. This is the little that I know. Coleridge didn't really finish his chapter on imagination when he wrote what's that famous book? Literaria something or other.
Yeah, Biographica Literaria. Yeah.
That one. And because somebody told him not to, so he took that advice. And then the Romantics, because he was kind of the father of that period, right? Like he really sowed those seeds for those people.
Yeah.
They were kind of left flailing in that department, and it seems like the Inklings took up the cross in that sense, right? And tried to,
Especially Barfield, especially Barfield, but yes, the
well, I
Inklings
think they
brought a
all
lot of
did in
people.
their
Oh
own
yeah,
way, right? In
absolutely,
their own
100%.
way, they that's what
They're
that
all plowing in the same fields.
right. They're all trying to expand, bring romanticism, let's say, to its full fruition. And so it perhaps this is why Tolkien has such strong critique. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, I'm going to start reading. In Macbeth, when it is read, I find the witches tolerable. They have a narrative function and some hint of dark significance, though they are vulgarized, poor things of their kind. They are almost intolerable in the play. They would be quite intolerable if I were not fortified by some memory of them, as they are in the story as read. I am told that I should feel differently if I had the mind of the period, with its witch hunts and witch trials, but that is to say, if I regarded the witches as possible, indeed likely, in the primary world. In other words, if they cease to be fantasy. That argument concedes the point. To be dissolved or to be degraded is the likely fate of fantasy when a dramatist tries to use it, even such a dramatist as Shakespeare. Macbeth is indeed a work by a playwright who ought, at least on this occasion, to have written a story if he had the skill or patience for that art. A reason more important, I think, than the inadequacy of stage effects is this. Drama has, of its very nature, already attempted a kind of bogus, or shall I say at least substitute magic, the visible and audible presentation of imaginary men in a story. That is in itself an attempt to counterfeit the magician's wand. To introduce, even with mechanical success, into this quasi-magical secondary world, a further fantasy or magic is to demand, as it were, an inner or tertiary world. It is a world too much. To make such a thing may not be impossible. I have never seen it done with success, but at least it cannot be claimed as the proper mode of drama, in which walking and talking people have been found to be the natural instruments of capital A art and illusion. For this precise reason, that the characters and even the scenes are in drama not imagined but actually beheld. Drama is, even though it uses a similar material, words, verse, plot, an art fundamentally different from narrative art. Thus, if you prefer drama to literature, as many literary critics plainly do, or form your critical theories primarily from dramatic critics, or even from drama, you are apt to misunderstand pure story-making and to constrain it to the limitations of stage plays. You are, for instance, likely to prefer characters, even the basest and dullest, to things. Very little about trees as trees can be got into a play. Now, Farian drama, those plays which, according to abundant records, the elves have often presented to men, can produce fantasy with a realism and immediacy beyond the compass of any human mechanism. As a result, their usual effect upon a man is to go beyond secondary belief. If you are present at a Farian drama, you yourself are, or think you are, bodily inside its secondary world. The experience may be very similar to dreaming, and has, it would seem, sometimes by men, been confounded with it. But in Farian drama, you are in a dream that some other mind is weaving, and the knowledge of that alarming fact may slip from your grasp. To experience directly a secondary world, the potion is too strong, and you give to it primary belief, however marvelous the events. You are deluded. Whether that is the intention of the elves, always or at any time, is another question. They, at any rate, are not themselves deluded. This is for them a form of art, and distinct from wizardry or magic, properly so called. They do not live in it, though they can perhaps afford to spend more time at it than human artists can. The primary world, reality of elves and men is the same, if differently valued and perceived.
Well, wait a minute here. What is he talking about? The way he shoots that straight, as if you were just stating facts, cannot go without commentary. What do you think he's driving at there?
Well, I'm trying to put myself in this Farian realm that he's talking about, and I kind of get it. You know, like recently I wrote a poem about a conversation I had with the duck on the lake, and I put myself in the duck.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I've had with this essay right from the get-go is it feels like he's too technical. It feels like he's, you know, he wants to bring us into a world of magic.
Well, he's not very technical here.
Well, yeah, well, okay. Maybe explain that to me, because his uses of primary and secondary world.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That bothers me a little bit because, and maybe he'll get to it in the essay, I don't know, but you know, to me, the primary world is the secondary world. Like that's the whole gist of a lot of the scenes in Fantasties by George MacDonald, where the shadow arrives, and the shadow, you know, when it covers over something, it loses its magic and it becomes just, you know, the primary world, right? Just the regular old world that you live in. And so what MacDonald is saying is the regular old world you live in is actually magic. And I don't know if that's where Tolkien is going to take us, or if he's just being crotchety. He feels really grumpy to me.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, like, so the way, I mean, what he says at first is pretty comprehensible. He's like, at least in the drama of his day, its ability to represent anything of fantasy was so poor, and that the stagecraft made it so ridiculous that it ruined the story for him, right? He would rather just read it in a book where his own imagination can make it come to life for him. And so I think this is what, when he's talking about Farian drama, he's cleverly talking about the way in which his own imagination works.
Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, but Nate, if we're honest, like, haven't you ever had your imagination working while you're watching a drama?
Right. Well, if you remember the first time, we actually did overlap with this section before, and I was the one who was arguing really hard in defense of drama as an art form.
Yeah.
And that Tolkien is wrong.
Yeah.
He's being a little too
technical.
Yeah, he's being too technical and too crotchety, and it's interesting. Obviously, if anybody wants to know whether Tolkien would approve of the films based on his books, regardless of the faithfulness of the books or any questions of that, I think the answer is no. Even if they were completely faithful and would have no qualms about that, he seems to just inherently dislike fantasy drama.
Well, whatever doesn't match his own imagination, right? Then it's contrived because he has a certain, you know.
Yeah, because his image of what it is has been spoiled by the way it's being presented.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he wants to maintain his image of it. But that is actually why it's a secondary world, though, right? Here's the thing, is like, I would say this. Here's what I'll say that Tolkien might be missing. When the visual presentation of a work of fantasy imaginative fiction can create a shared vision that everyone can participate in imaginatively, that does more to awaken the possibilities of seeing the real nature of the primary world than everyone's private imagination of a fantastic story on the page does.
I think, just to answer Zep, I think that's what Nate
but that's a dark, but as we know from Barfield, that's a dark power too, right? Because you can get people to start believing in a world that is really terrible through the same power.
Well, okay, just want to address this. I think that's what Nate was saying about the stagecraft of his day.
Yeah,
That,
that's exactly right.
but here's
yeah.
the thing. I was thinking if he was watching Avatar, he would have hated that too, because it was too perfect. So there's this in between, clunky and overly symmetrical, right? Like overly perfect that we just naturally reject.
I would actually say it's also a lack of imagination on Tolkien's part. No, I'm deadly serious. I'm deadly serious. Okay. So first of all, I've written quite a few plays, and I am a lover of drama.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the most astounding things I've ever seen performed on a stage are done with very minimalist sets that completely rely on the imagination of the audience to fill in the gaps. And if the dialogue is good enough and the acting is good enough, you'd be surprised how far that just kind of very bare kind of presentation can carry a play.
They're almost the best because your imagination goes just hog wild, right?
Right. So he's kind of blaming. It's like he's actually he's somewhat contradictory here. It's like he likes to be able to use his imagination fully, and prefers Macbeth on the written page as opposed to when a stage presentation of Macbeth. So, but it's actually his imagination that's failing.
Do you think he would
see drama?
You think he would have liked postmodern art? Because it wasn't gaudy. It was minimal, you know.
Yeah,
and I mean, they might have had the argument. I'm not sure, but they might have made the argument that you can fill in the blanks with your own.
Yeah, I think this is just a quirk of his personality. And this is still a great essay with lots of cool stuff to say. But I'm kind of like, nah. Shall we move on? Move on? I think we both can kind of agree that, like, not so much.
I think he maybe is autistic. I'm starting to get that vibe.
Yeah.
He's too
my son who's now behind us. He's working on. He's got a little table set up in my office that he works from. He's actually started his work day. He's working on he's got a contract for a role-playing game that he's designing, and he's or a role-playing game supplement that he's designing. He's also working on a game too that he's going to put under his own company. He's just come up with a name and a logo recently. He's asking me to help him like register his trademark and all that kind of stuff for him. But he's working on his project in the back. But he loves like really cheesy, poorly made fantasy movies with really, really bad special effects.
Right.
And he's autistic. It doesn't spoil the enjoyment of it for him.
Well, no, but if he were to fix on it, it would. Like
if he were to fixate on it, okay,
yes,
I gotcha.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. And
so the problem is that Tolkien has decided to fixate on like it doesn't look the way it should.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me. I'm just like, but he may, because he is a little grumpy,
Well, it also means it's also kind of closed off because it means you're only interested in what you imagine of it, right? You're not interested. You're not open to what other people's imagination brings to the same text.
Well, we didn't like what he
which is what you get, by the way, invariably when it comes to drama. That's what always is happening with drama. You're not actually getting only what the playwright intended. The director's imagination is going to be imprinted on the production that you are watching, and that's not a bad thing. That's an awesome thing. That's one of the things that's awesome about drama is it's something that is familiar to you. You can see with brand new, fresh eyes when it's presented to you in a way from someone with an extraordinary imagination who saw something in it you didn't see.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Plus the actors. Have you ever played the game where you say, "I went to the store today. I went to the store today. I went to the store today. Right. I went to the store today.
Yes.
I went to the store." So
Right, exactly
They're
right.
constantly changing the meaning, and so the actor is putting the emphasis where
Yeah,
he
that's
feels.
right. There's a drama is a collective work of, by its nature, drama is a collective imaginary work where the playwright is only has part of it. So what Tolkien's problem seems to be is that, and he's an author, so this kind of makes sense, is like, no, 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 I wanted to stay completely in my control. But you know what though? Even Tolkien doesn't have full control over his own secondary worlds and imaginary creations,
Mm.
because then it gets into the imagination of the reader, and the reader does not necessarily see exactly what you saw, Professor. Sorry.
And I mean, he has a very healthy imagination. I mean, we see that in the books, right? So it's detailed. It's like over the top detailed.
Compare this to what McDonald says in the imagination essay about the same kind of thing. He's like, well, your meaning might be better than
Of course.
mine.
Yeah.
Or your imagination might be better than mine.
Mhm.
So there's like, I don't know. It's just like, yeah, it's a little bit too.
Well, Nate, don't you think you could understand better now why him and Lewis argued about the quality of Narnia, of the
Yeah,
Narnia Chronicles?
yeah. Lewis is much more unpretentious than Tolkien. He
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I actually think Narnia is very layered. Like, you can take it at a very
It's
literal
way more
level.
complex. Yeah,
Very
Tolkien missed a lot of complexity that was there
Yeah.
because was fixed in his own ideas,
Mhm.
and he really didn't like the way that he mixed historical periods and mixed mythologies together into this like stew that was Narnia. He didn't like the tone of certain choices that Lewis made, but I don't know. I think
He
Narnia's
called it an
great.
analogy, which he hated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's read on before
Okay. We need a word for this elvish craft is the next line. You want me to read that paragraph?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
All right. We need a word for this elvish craft, but all the words that have been applied to it have been blurred and confused with other things. Magic is ready to hand, and I have used it above, page 39. But I should not have done so. Magic should be reserved for the operations of the magician. Art is the human process that produces, by the way, it is not only or ultimate object, secondary belief. Art of the same sort, if more skilled and effortless, the elves can also use, or so the reports seem to show. But the more potent and specially elvish craft I will, for this lack of a less debatable word, call enchantment. Enchantment produces a secondary world into which both designer and spectator can enter, to the satisfaction of their senses while they are inside. But in its purity, it is artistic in desire and purpose. Magic produces or pretends to produce an alteration in the primary world, but it does not matter by whom it is said to be practiced, fey or mortal. It remains distinct from the other two. It is not an art, but a technique. It is not an art, but a technique. Its desire is power in this world, domination of things and wills. To the elvish craft, enchantment, fantasy aspires. And when it is successful, all forms of human art most nearly approach fantasy aspires. And when it is successful, of all forms of human art, it most clearly nearly approaches. At the heart of many man-made stories of the elves lies, open or concealed, pure or alloyed, the desire for a living, realized subcreative art, which, however much it may outwardly resemble it, is inwardly wholly different from the greed for self-centered power, which is the mark of a mere magician. Mm-hmm. Of this desire, the elves, in their better but still perilous part, are largely made, and it is from them that we may learn what is the central desire and aspiration of human fantasy, even if the elves are, all the more so, as they are, only a product of fantasy itself. That creative desire is only cheated by counterfeits, whether the innocent but clumsy devices of the human dramatist or the malevolent frauds of the magician. In this world, it is for men unsatisfiable and so imperishable. Uncorrupted, it does not seek delusion nor bewitchment and domination, but seeks shared enrichment, partners in making and delight, not slaves. Any thoughts? You want me to keep going?
No, keep going. I agree with all that.
All right. To many, fantasy, the sub-creative art which plays strange tricks with the world and all that is in it, combining nouns and redistributing adjectives, has seemed suspect, if not illegitimate. To some, it has seemed at least a childish folly, a thing only for peoples or persons in their youth. As for its legitimacy, I will say no more than to quote a brief passage from a letter I once wrote to a man who described myth and fairy story as lies. But to do him justice, he was kind enough and confused enough to call fairy story making breathing a lie through silver. Dear sir, I said, although now long estranged, man is not wholly lost nor wholly changed. Disgraced he may be, that he is not dethroned, and keeps the rags of lordship once he owned. Man, sub-creator, the reflected light, through whom is splintered from a single white, too many hues and endlessly combined in living shapes that move from mind to mind. Through all the crannies of the world we filled with elves and goblins, though we dared to build gods in their houses out of dark and light, and sowed the seed of dragons. 'Twas our right. Used or misused, that right has not decayed. We make still the law in which we're made.
We make still by the law.
By the law in which we were made. Yes, thank you.
Which is very reminiscent of MacDonald in the Fantastic Imagination essay, because then he talks about having to remain within the capital L law, which is
he's talking right there. He's very clearly talking about subcreation from Divine Sophia. That's what he's talking about in that section.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was just going to say, like in the Fantastic Imagination, MacDonald talks about the storyteller has to remain within the laws of the world that he creates, right?
Yes.
I mean, he can create laws, but he has to stay in those laws, or the law. He calls it the law. And I don't know if it's natural law or if it's spirit. I think it's both. It's both natural law and spiritual law. Anyway, and then MacDonald says, if you break that law while you're writing the story, you fall out of the story, right? So Tolkien's nodding. I don't know if he's doing that directly to George MacDonald or if he's just aware of that same principle, right? That you have to stay within the law.
Well, I think some of it is just sort of like it's kind of like it seems to be a thing that is just a lot of it is just British culture, I think, which is why you find these sort of overlapping. We do know that Lewis had read MacDonald. I don't have any evidence of any direct influence on Tolkien by MacDonald. So if we're talking about Lewis, the answer would obviously be yes. He just probably got it from MacDonald because he was a huge fan of MacDonald. I don't know about
no,
Tolkien.
I think they all were. They were all reading MacDonald for sure. But anyway,
maybe I don't know. I actually don't know that. I don't know that.
From what I've read, they did.
Okay.
I've watched lots of the Wade Center stuff. Yeah. And they all agree that if there hadn't been a George MacDonald, there wouldn't be the influence.
All right. Fair enough then.
But anyway, it's not to say that this was George's idea. Could have come from Coleridge. But I'm just pointing out that Tolkien is running along that same vein. So
yeah, I just think it's something older. It's actually older than, I mean, I would say that what they're drawing on is okay. I would say it's older than Coleridge even, really, right? What's the name of our channel? Or I guess it's my channel now.
Grail Country,
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's something that just comes out of the collective imagination of the people of the British Isles that they're all tapping into, including Coleridge. I think the thing is that Coleridge and MacDonald are the people that do the best job of beginning to articulate it in a way that makes it accessible.
Mm-hmm. That's
what I think. But the stream they're drawing from it's a very ancient stream.
Yeah. But I personally see a lot of MacDonald's influence on all. I mean, Charles Wood,
for sure.
I haven't
Yeah.
really delved into, but I do see. I mean, I did in that one book. I mentioned something that felt like McDonald to me, but definitely in Barfield, Lewis, and Tolkien,
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah.
But anyway, shall we go on?
Sure.
Fantasy is a natural human activity. It certainly does not destroy or even insult reason. It does not either blunt the appetite for nor obscure the perception of scientific verity. On the contrary, the keener and the clearer is the reason, the better fantasy will it make. To know, if men were ever in a state in which they did not want to know or could not perceive truth, facts, or evidence, then fantasy would languish until they were cured. If they ever get into that state, it would not seem at all impossible. Fantasy will perish and become morbid delusion.
That's kind of interesting.
That's really good, actually. There's a state within orthodoxy called prelest. Are you familiar with it?
Mm-mm.
It's a form of spiritual delusion, and it's talked about quite a bit in the Philokalia, because people spend a lot of time in the wilderness alone,
Right?
And they start, getting deluded about stuff, spiritual
Right.
delusion. And what's really interesting, like I have a brother who's got some severe mental illness, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. It's called schizoaffective disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's really, really not good, his first place is the first place he goes is spiritual delusion. It's either he's God or he's Christ, or he sees
this is super common.
Satan everywhere, kind of thing, right? But that's not the only kind of spiritual delusion. Like there's false piety, there's false righteousness, there's all kinds of prelest. It's if anybody's interested, check it out. It's great.
Just to clarify, she's saying prelest with an E, and not prelast with an A, which is actually an ecclesial office. So that was confusing to me at first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, but I looked it up and saw that what you were talking about.
Marcus, I threw a link in here if you want to join us. I know you love Tolkien.
Yeah,
and
he brought up Tolkien in our last episode on Bulgakov's philosophy of economy.
Yeah. And maybe you want to talk more about prelest. You're probably more up to snuff with that than I am. But since he wrote his dissertation on monasticism and stuff. Okay, so that's what came to my mind. Fantasy will perish and become morbid delusion, right?
Well, it's interesting here that he says that, like, fantasy, essentially what he's saying here is that fantasy will be stronger in the presence of strong reason, and that when reason collapses, it's going to become morbid delusion rather than true fantasy.
And reason is not rationality. Just have to make that distinction.
No.
Reason is the intellect, I like to use the example, God says, come, let us reason together, right?
Well, tell me specifically, the form of reasoning that's most important in fantasy is abductive reasoning, which abductive reasoning is the kind of reasoning where you work from given the following set of circumstances, what would be true. So when you're working within secondary worlds and you're trying to be consistent within the laws and nature of the secondary world that you've set up, you need to be able to be skilled with abductive reasoning, because you need to consistently be able to engage in that abductive reasoning in order to be able to convincingly show people that in a world where this is true, this is what would happen. And that is a very different kind of reasoning than, say, logic, formal logic.
Right.
It relies more heavily on the intuition, but it's still quite rational.
I think, yeah, I think it's a kind of a form of empathy, in the best sense of the word. That word's been overused lately, but it's like an empathic resonance with something, right? It's that, I am that, right? When you're abductively reasoning, is what I'm understanding from the way you're explaining it, is where you can, if you were that thing in this world, how would you behave? What would the world look like? You have to actually,
Yeah, right. It's
um,
so it's a skill that I use a lot. It's something I'm good at, and it's a skill that I use a lot in the role playing games that I run. Right. So it's
yeah,
like something will come up in the game that I haven't planned in
yeah,
advance,
it's a
and the
form.
players will ask me to come up with an answer, and I'm usually able to come up with convincing answers that make sense within the collective fiction that we're creating at the table, and I'm able to do that through abductive reasoning.
Mhm.
Right? So I didn't know this circumstance was going to come up, but since this circumstance has come up, what would make this make sense in the context of everything else we built so far? Why would this have happened? So,
Mhm. Mhm. All right. Should we go on?
yeah.
For creative fantasy is founded upon the hard recognition that things are so in the world as it appears under the sun, on a recognition of fact, but not a slavery to it. So upon logic was founded the nonsense that displays itself in the tales and rhymes of Lewis Carroll. If men really could not distinguish between frogs and men, fairy stories about frog kings would not have arisen. Fantasy can, of course, be carried to excess. It can be ill done. It can be put to evil uses. It may even delude the minds out of which it came. But of what human thing in this fallen world is that not true? Men have conceived not only of elves, but they have imagined gods and worshipped them, even worshipped those most deformed by their author's own evil. But they have made false gods out of other materials, their nations, their banners, their monies, even their sciences, and their social and economic theories have demanded human sacrifice. Abyssus non tollit usum, or usum. Fantasy remains a human right. We make in our measure and in our derivative mode because we are made, and not only made, but made in the image and likeness of a maker,
He
which is,
says, oh, one quick correction. He said it's notions, not nations.
oh, sorry,
At least in my text, it says notions, which I
notion?
can see why. I can see why you run into read nations because the
No,
next
it says nation.
banners, right?
It says
The next
nation in my book.
Oh, so I have a typo in my PDF because that makes sense. That mine just says that they're notions, they're banners. I would imagine that nations make more sense since it's followed by banners.
And money.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So what I do know about this essay is that this is an argument in favor of fantasy, because fantasy has been disregarded in a lot of Christian circles. Imagination was always considered a bad thing because, like he says here, it can be used for evil, right?
Yep.
And he says, but of what human thing in this fallen world is that not true? So he's trying to redeem it, which is exactly what Coleridge was trying to do, is what MacDonald was trying to do, is what Lewis is doing, Barfield is doing. They're trying to redeem imagination. And whenever I'm talking about it, because I was influenced directly by MacDonald first, imagination always has a capital I for me. And then fancy is the evil use of the imagination, let's say. I like MacDonald's statement when he says, if it cannot go out to worship, it will stay home to be sensual. I think that's such a great definition. Mm-hmm. Because he says it happens when it's repressed by dogma. And only that, which is just amazing to me. So yeah. And so I just know that Tolkien is making an argument here for fantasy, because I'm sure he ran into quite a bit of oh, great. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hey,
Hello.
guys.
Hi.
Going.
Good.
Hey, I've been listening, very interested in what you guys are saying. And
Well, we're interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you for joining us.
yeah, absolutely. I was thinking in terms of, it seems like Tolkien, this has always been my impression too, that he was kind of more of a respecter of persons or
Mhm.
the reader, in the sense that like he has all these rules about don't be too preachy,
Mhm.
Right.
you know, and in that sense, he's not trying to dominate the reader or make them think something. He wants to create a story that lives on its own, and then the characters, their actions make sense based on the, you know, the story he's telling.
Mhm.
And then if it gets too preachy, it kind of breaks the fourth wall, so to
Right.
speak.
Breaks the spell.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's kind of, it seems like that's kind of maybe what his criticism of Lewis's Narnia maybe was. That was
Gotcha.
a little too on the nose kind of a thing.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm just reminded of this because I happen to have this whole thing emblazoned in my mind. this let me just find it. It's in the Fantastic Imagination. Oh shoot. Okay, here. So George MacDonald says the same thing. When God would give us a drama, he makes a Shakespeare. Or would he construct a drama more immediately his own? He begins with the building of the stage itself. And that stage is a world, a universe of worlds. He makes the actors, and they do not act, they are their part. He utters them into the visible work to work out their life, his drama. When he would have an epic, he sends a thinking hero into his drama. And the epic is the soliloquy of his Hamlet. Instead of writing his lyrics, he sets his birds and his maidens a singing. All the processes of the ages are God's science. All the flow of history is his poetry. His sculpture is not in marble, but in living and speech-giving forms, which pass away not to yield place to those that come after, but to be perfected in a nobler studio. What he has done remains, although it vanishes, and he never either forgets what he has once done or even does it once again. As thoughts move in the mind of a man, so move the worlds of men and women in the mind of God, and make no confusion there, for there they had their birth, the offspring of his imagination. Man is but a thought of God. That's what came to my mind when you were describing what Tolkien wanted to do. He wanted to just create a world and let the hero be his himself, and you know, not narrate the story, so to speak. That's interesting. I wonder if that was his biggest beef.
Well, it's interesting. In a book club I have, we read Dorothy Sayers' The Mind of the Maker, and she touches on that a little bit too. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where she talks about how you properly write a story and how that relates to actually God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the three parts. But she does have this one section in there, and Dorothy Sayers was one of the Inklings, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
And so she had this section where she talked about characters, how if a character acted improperly in the story as written, that it was story breaking, and that it made it terrible literature. And so she would talk about how she would write a story sometimes, and she wrote those mystery novels that she was well known for. And she would talk about stories that she had read that a character would act a certain way, then suddenly it would act out of character. And she could see what the author was trying to do. The author was trying to manipulate the story or make the plot go a certain way. But she ends up kind of betraying that character. And then she would talk about some of her stories that she wrote where she thought she knew how a character was going to act, but then they wouldn't.
It surprised her.
Yeah, it surprised her. She'd have to.
Mhm.
You know, I
Just
just
like a
did a
different-
conversation
was
with my sister who's a ventriloquist.
Hmm.
And she was talking about how her puppet will surprise her. You know, like she said, her own children have said, "Mom, you know, it's the weirdest thing when we're watching you. We're watching you do this gig with your puppet, and you're talking to your puppet, and we can see that he just said something to you that surprised you."
That's really funny.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
I mean, that's what's going on with an author too. If they're writing a story and a character does something like you just said, surprises them, right?
Well, I
Well,
think we've all had that experience too when you're talking.
right. So I would say what we're trying to hit on here is it depends on where is the creator, author. Were you talking about authors? So we'll just say author in this case. But really, this could apply to any artist working in any art. So the question is just like, from what source is the artist drawing their ideas? And in as much as they are allowing the art to unfold, then it is then the source of the idea can end up reflecting something that doesn't necessarily purely come from them. That they're trying.
That's exactly what McDonald just said in the quote that I read. You know,
Right.
and make no mistake, when I can't remember what he said. The world of men and women move in the mind of God, right? Man is but a thought of God. But there's another thing here that is interesting when you mentioned Dorothy Sayers. He says the word imagination means an imaging or a making of likenesses. The imagination is that faculty which gives form to thought, not necessarily uttered form, but form capable of being uttered in shape or in sound, or in any mode upon which the senses can lay hold. It is therefore that faculty in man which is likest to the prime operation of the power of God, and has therefore been called the creative faculty, and its exercise creation. Poet means maker. We must not forget, however, and then he talks about this gulf that lies between creator and poet. But his reason is because he says, where is that now? It is better to keep the word creation for that calling out of nothing. No, that's not it. Everything of man must have been of God first, and it will help much towards our understanding of the imagination and its functions in man if we first succeed in regarding aright the imagination of God, in which the imagination of man lives and moves and has its being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you think kind of what they're getting at is like a 3-tiered participation, in the sense that the author is trying to tap into the creator of all things, like God, and there's a participation that takes place there in a proper sense, and then the reader of the work, or the person who's watching the play or whatever, also has a participation, and that there's some kind of interplay. There's like a proper participation that needs to take place between God, the creator of the art or work, and the person, the viewer. I don't know.
No, I don't. I don't think you're starting to get onto something here, and this has to do with what I was saying about, like, well, what source is the artist drawing on, right? So, is the artist just being arbitrary, and is the creation coming completely from their will, or are they tapping into something deeper? When an artist is tapping into something deeper, that's what opens up the possibility of that 3-tier participation that you were talking about. Because it wouldn't necessarily be impossible, but it would be certainly unhealthy, because what's being presented on the page or in the drama will be a distortion of reality, because it won't actually, because it's not coming from the proper source. And so if it is participated in, the consequences of that participation in that 3rd-tier participation would be negative, because the world that person is going to be participating in is going to be a shadowy, dark caricature of the real. Whereas,
or it would have just come from the author, their own.
Well, the author is going to, but that
flawed.
if the author is tapping into that, and then they create a work of art, put that work of art into the world. Barfield's actually very clear about this possibility, right?
Mhm.
Like in a way, like artists really see and experience the things that they're presenting to us. So if the world that they really see and experience is a world that is a shadowy, delusional world where they've tapped into the wrong source to create it in the first place, because it's been tainted with too much of their will, right? Mm-hmm. And not allowing it to reflect the divine imagination, but trying too much to make it a creation of their own will.
It's not a I'm reminded of the Williams book. What was the book that we read and did that?
Yeah, the Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth by
the other Inkling.
Oh, the Charles Williams book.
What was that book called that we did together with?
That was the one. That was the one about the Grail, right?
Yeah.
What was the name of that?
I don't remember the name of it.
I blanked out on the name of that book.
But there's 2 kinds of magic in that book. There's good and evil, right? Like,
yeah, this is actually Tolkien in the paragraph we just read. This is the kind of distinction he's trying to make between magic and enchantment.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the difference between the two, is that like magic is always like it's oriented toward the will of whoever is doing
it's control.
It's about control and power in this. Control and power in this world. It's not about actually
enchantment requires a kenotic response to the world where you're not imposing. Like this is good. This is good.
Which we can, in the discussion about character and allowing characters to truly be who they are. Right.
Yeah.
That is a kenotic act on the part of the writer to do that, right? Because you're letting go of the control of that character and letting that character be who they are. You're giving them the space to be what they
then they
be. And every great author talks like this about the character. Dostoevsky is particularly strong. And the way in the sense of the sense of his characters being real to Dostoevsky was very, very strong, and they surprised him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you're not imposing. Like this is the is that someone got a vacuum cleaner going or something?
There's someone outside my house blowing leaves, I think, if that's what you're hearing.
Okay, it's not that loud. I just wondered. It's okay.
I wasn't sure who it was.
It's not. The only person that vacuums in my house is me, so.
You should be very concerned if you hear your vacuum. Something is afoot in Sherry's house.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is what Goethe talks about, in the sense that you can't, like his Metamorphosis of Plants is a perfect example of him not imposing his will, but discovering. And MacDonald uses the word trouver, the French word to discover, to find. And when I had that conversation with Jordan Daniel Wood on the Imagination essay, we talked about that what you're actually doing when you're engaging in divine imagination is you're discovering or uncovering, or right. It's not, You're not inventing new, this is what frustrates me a little bit when you start talking about imagination to people and they think it's terrible because they think it's making shit up, and it's not. It's discovering something. And that's why I love the phrase, if the imagination is repressed by dogma, if it can't go out to worship, which is what Goethe did when he observed the plant and discovered the way that the flower was made, right, on the plant. Like, it was an actual scientific discovery.
Yeah.
He went out to worship, right? He's not imposing. And if the imagination can't do that, then it will stay home to be sensual. So it becomes completely self-absorbed, right? Anyway.
Right. So the function, like, I would say this, like, the proper function of imagination is the faculty by which the real is disclosed in spite of appearances, where you can see through you can see somehow beyond what is merely the empirical presentation of your senses, to see something that you did not see before, that when you see it, it has this sense about it that that this is what is really real. And it is more real than the brute empirical sensory data that is coming from your senses.
There's a kind of resonance. It's kind of a resonance.
Yes. Yes.
Happening.
It's a resonance. That's exactly right.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not something through discursive reasoning, which is why it's really, really hard when people are suspicious of this kind of function of imagination. It's really, really hard to break through that. And because it's not something that you're going to be able to convince someone of through a syllogism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is why, for me, I don't know, this might sound like a roundabout way to put it, but that's how I think. The Christian life, to me, is a call to holiness. So if that's true, then I should be going out to worship. And my whole life should be lived as a going out to worship, right? And that's not idolatry, but that is seeing God everywhere present and filling all things, right? So if I am going out to worship, I am engaged and working with divine imagination. And then I will find those little Easter eggs, that God is leaving everywhere. George MacDonald uses the phrase or the example of the snowdrop, which is a flower in Europe that pops out of the snow. And it's a very pale green, and it has a white flower that kind of drips.
We have some.
Oh, you
have some in our yard. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do. They'll pop right out of the snow. Yep.
Yeah, right out of the snow, way early, right? It's like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, a scientist can tear it apart, but he'll never see pale, confident submission and hope. That's the difference to me between being tapped in to divine imagination, because when you look at that snowdrop, it tells you something about God.
Well, do you remember? I think there's a John Bear lecture on Irenaeus, I think, and he talks about in that lecture on Irenaeus, he talks about Irenaeus's account of like the death of a martyr in the arena, right? And how a young girl, right? And people see Christ, in this martyr. Well, the faculty by which you see Christ in a martyr is not a function of your senses, right?
Well, not the obvious ones, yeah.
Right. And I would say that, like, the faculty of imagination, as MacDonald is presenting it and as Coleridge is presenting it, is the faculty by which something like that is possible, where we are able to, despite existing in this fallen world that is full of shadows and illusions, to see what is true and real shining forth.
Right.
That's that, which is when Barfield talks about imagination as a truth-bearing faculty, that's ultimately the kind of thing he means. Because imagination presents to you truths that it's deeply connected to faith. They're like, because imagination is almost like having a healthy imagination that is not disconnected from reason, as Tolkien talks about here, right? Because reason only enhances the capacity for imagination, understood properly, is the faculty by which faith even becomes a possibility. Otherwise, you're left with nothing but just brute empiricism and nothing else.
Right. Well, and you can even look at science as making explicit the implicit truth of God.
Yeah, but science,
in
here's
the
the thing,
universe.
it's like science, here's the interesting thing about science, though, is science is remarkably dependent upon the faculty of imagination.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, yes, you have empiricism and experimentation and all that kind of thing in science, but all scientific ideas are born in imagination.
Yeah.
And so science is just dependent upon imagination as well. So scientific truth is as much dependent upon imagination as anything else.
I got another little quote from the imagination essay on that. It's he says, "Shall then the human intellect, we ask, come into readier contact with the divine imagination than that human imagination? The work of the higher must be discovered by the search of the lower in degree, which is yet similar in kind. Let us not be supposed to exclude the intellect from a share in every highest office. Man is not divided when the manifestations of his life are distinguished. The intellect is all in every part. There were no imagination without intellect, however much it may appear that intellect can exist without imagination. What we mean to insist upon is that in finding out the works of God, which is what George MacDonald starts the essay out with, that's the job of the imagination, is to find out the works of God. So he says, in finding out the works of God, the intellect must labor workmanlike under the direction of the architect, imagination."
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So they
intellect under imagination.
Oh, Jed's here. Yeah, well, that's the way he puts it. I've spoken to some people who who believe that intellect was higher than imagination, and I'm just like, Lord, have mercy.
What would you say to Graham here, Jerry?
Parasympathetic imagination. I don't even know what that is.
Well, I've never heard that. I've never heard that either. There's a parasympathetic nervous system, but how many do we have? I think what he's suggesting here to me, what I would say is this: okay, the default state of most human beings, right, fallen human beings, is fragmented, and so one of the problems with our imagination.
I just want to say, Jed, jump in. I put a link in there. If anybody wants to jump in.
What are the problems with our imagination? And we've both fully acknowledged the dark side of imagination and how it can be used for ill here. No one's trying to avoid that. That comes from that fragmentation, right? So in order for us to use our imagination properly, we need to be moving out of that fragmented state into unity. And I would say that that unity is found in Christ. And if you're in Christ, then your imagination should no longer be fragmented, but it should be unitive and working toward unity.
Well,
I don't think that that's a distinct. I don't think like I don't. Where do you think the kingdom of God is, Justin? That's what I would ask you. I don't think you're separating things unnecessarily that I don't think need to be separate.
Well, it's just because imagination is it's like throwing a hot potato at people. They're just like, ooh, ooh, you know,
Yeah.
they don't really want to touch it.
Right,
Because-
particularly in Orthodox circles, because there's a long tradition of viewing the imagination as a certain way. But
I wouldn't say that. I mean,
what Orthodox theology treats as imagination, and what is being talked about by McDonald, etc., is not the same thing.
well,
It's
I
not-
beg to differ because I read a lot of Orthodox literature and it's very imaginative. But there is also like one of the things that I noticed as an evangelical Christian was there was a total lack of imagination in their books, in their music. Like it just all fell really, really flat to me. So I think it's just a human tendency, especially if you have religious sensibilities, to steer clear of imagination, so to speak. But I mean, if you read Prayers by the Lake by Saint Nikolai Velimirovich, you will find out that he's got some healthy imagination going on. I've got a thing in here, actually. I don't know where it is in the book. So, but he says, there it is. He says in this, these are just prayers that he wrote. All the prophets have from the beginning cried out to my soul, imploring her to make herself a virgin and prepare herself to receive the divine Son into her immaculate womb, imploring her to become a ladder down which God will descend. The wise man of China admonishes my soul to be peaceful and still and to wait for the Tao to act within her. Glory be the memory of Lao Tzu, the teacher and prophet of his people. The wise man of India teaches my soul not to be afraid of suffering, but through the arduous and relentless drilling in purification and prayer, to elevate herself to the one on high who will come out to greet her and manifest to her his face and his power. Glorious be the memory of Krishna, the teacher and prophet of his people. The royal son of India teaches my soul to empty herself completely of every seed and crop of the world, to abandon all the serpentine allurements of frail and shadowy matter, and then in vacuity, tranquility, purity, and bliss, to await nirvana. Blessed be the memory of Buddha, the royal son and inexorable teacher of his people. The thunderous wise man of Persia tells my soul there is nothing in the world except light and darkness, and that the soul must break free from the darkness, as the day does from the night. For the sons of light are conceived from the light, and the sons of darkness are conceived from darkness. Glorious be the memory of Zoroaster, the great prophet of his people. The prophet of Israel cries out to my soul, behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, whose name will be the God-man. Glorious be the memory of Isaiah, the clairvoyant prophet of my soul. O heavenly Lord, open the hearing of my soul, lest she become deaf to the counsels of your messengers. Do not slay the prophets sent to you, my soul, for their graves contain not them, but those who slew them. And then he goes at the very end, he says, be a virgin, my soul, for virginity is of the soul, is the only semi-reality in a world of shadows, a semi-reality until God is born within her. Then the soul becomes a full reality. Be wise, my virgin, and cordially receive the precious gifts of the wise men from the East, intended for your son. I just love this so much. Do not glance back toward the west where the sun sets, and do not crave gifts that are figmental and false. I mean, Nate, you got to have a very good imagination to write that.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't suggesting that nobody in the Orthodox East has a good imagination. what I was saying is that there's a patristic tradition of criticizing the imagination.
Yeah, but that's just a lack. That's just a lack of
true.
distinction. It's a lack of distinction, which is.
I agree. That's which I tried to qualify it by saying I don't think that the patristic criticism of the imagination is talking about the same thing that MacDonald is talking about, or that Coleridge is talking about, or that Barfield is talking about. They're talking about
because if that were true, then you couldn't understand the allegorical reading of the scriptures from the patristic fathers, because what they're talking about is incarnational theology within the cosmos, and that in George MacDonald's description is called poetic relations.
Yes.
So, which is why he says poet means maker. Okay, God is
the reason I have to say those things, Sherry, is because the ortho bros get in my comments all the time and freak out.
Oh, just ignore them. They're just as bad as every other fundamentalist out there. Jed, how you doing?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Zeph, I haven't met you yet. I every once in a while I pop into this little corner, and Nate and Sherry are old friends of mine. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say on imagination. And I'm kind of jumping in on this in a lark, but I had a question actually.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I've been thinking about this a lot lately with the work that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
What is the relationship? Like, how does reality, like I see a kind of a dialogical or a dialectical relationship between reality and the imagination, right? Where, let me use an example. We did not have space travel until after we had the idea of space travel.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
H.G. Wells is actually drawing off of, like, his idea in his space travel was that we would launch things into space with like a gun, a literal gun would launch them into space. But people began to play with his ideas and realized that's essentially how rocket technology gets discovered. So the idea is shaping the material substrate that then shapes what other ideas are possible. And all of a sudden, within 100-year span between H.G. Wells, we have the Apollo space program, right? So I'm interested in that productive generative relationship between imagination and reality.
Yeah, well,
how reality serves as a constraint, but also kind of a launching pad for what is then a possible for the imagination.
What comes to my mind right away is how Rupert Sheldrake talks about the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile was just a fantasy. Nobody had done it before. And then one man did it. And after that, it just gets done over and over. And now the time gets shortened and shortened and shortened. Of course, we've got drugs now, but anyway, but that's his argument for morphic resonance, Jed. Like you teach a rat a maze, and then, in Washington, D.C., and then somewhere in Maine, they run other rats in that same maze and they can do it faster. Mm-hmm. And Jung would have called it, in my opinion, I don't know if this is right, but he would have called it collective consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, there is a unseen realm, right? Principalities and powers. And I think those are both good and evil. I mean, the Archangel Michael comes through those, right? Mm-hmm. Through the evil ones to do good on the earth for us. We have guardian angels, and here's another thing that's really interesting. So as far as I understand, Bulgakov thinks or makes the argument that your guardian angel is your future self. Okay. And Jeremy was talking to me one day about praying for his younger self. Because if the world is really timeless, as God says it is, right? Like God dwells everywhere present, filling all things is another word for timelessness. So if that's true, then you can pray for your younger self. And then if Bulgakov is right, that's your guardian angel. And, you know, and I was talking about this the other night. It was like, how many times in our lives have we had this feeling like, wow, I don't know how I got out of that mess. You know, it was really dicey. And I felt like I was lifted up and, you know, that I was saved from something, right? By some unseen thing. But perhaps that was the moment that you prayed for your for your former self. You know what I mean? Like, it gets kind of mind bending, but it's really interesting. And then I'll say one more thing, and then you guys can go for it because I want to hear what you're thinking. But I had this experience where I had to do CPR on my husband, and I never took a CPR course, and I didn't know how to do it, but for some reason I could do it. And I left him at the hospital, and I was driving home, and I was thinking about, how did I know that? Like, it was just running through my, like, you know, it was a big panic moment, right? And here I had like an hour to drive home, and it was quiet, and I was going over the whole thing. I was like, wait a minute, how did I even know what I was doing? And I could see in my mind's eye, I could see me putting my hands together. And then this thought came into my mind, but it was a third person. And it said, Sherry, you know that the angels put your hands like that, don't you? And I was like, oh, okay, that's just stupid. You know, and I drive home, and then I get home, and I had to call my neighbor to ask her to help us out because I was going to have to travel to another city. My husband needed surgery, all this stuff. And I'm telling her what happened. And then I said, okay, great. Thanks, Chelsea. And then I went to hang the phone up, and I could hear her calling my name, Sherry. And I said, yeah. And she goes, you know, the angels put your hands like that, right? She said the exact same thing. And I was just like, I froze, eh? And I said, why did you say that? You know? And I thought about it. And I thought, was that God? Was that prophetic? And then when I started thinking about this whole timelessness thing, I thought, did I hear Chelsea say that to me before she said it to me? Because she said the exact same thing.
I want to go back to the guardian angel thing.
Okay,
because
cool.
I think so I don't think you're wrong, although Bulgakov never explicitly says that. What he says is that like every person has a guardian angel that's unique to them, right?
Yeah.
And he says that humanity has a co-angelicity with the angels, and the angels have the angels also have a co-humanity with humanity. And one of the things he points at in establishing this is the fact that the New Jerusalem is said to contain the measures of both an angel and a man, and links those things together. The book, his book on angels is called Jacob's Ladder. If anyone wants to read it, it's a great book. That's where you would go to have more. But he doesn't quite explicitly say that, although you can certainly infer from what he does say.
Well, he's careful.
That's what he means. Yeah. Well, one of the other places where it becomes evident that might be what he means is in a different place than in his essay on the redemption of Satan. He links Lucifer and Satan in such a way that it is Lucifer who will ultimately become responsible for the salvation of Satan. So,
well, yeah, I mean, from a psychological point of view, the bringer of light will overcome the adversary. Just think about it in those terms. That's what those two words mean.
And in the restoration of all things, it will be like Satan will be destroyed by Lucifer. Like that's right. That's like, so it's not that Satan as Satan is lost, right?
Right, because he's just a contrarian.
but Lucifer is not.
Yeah.
Because that is well, to go bring it back to the whole imagination thing is like, because Lucifer is is a direct creation of the imagination of God, and anything that is a direct creation of the imagination of God is indestructible.
Mhm.
So let me toggle back then and drill in on the line of inquiry, because adding Satan to the mix is very interesting as well. So if we look at maybe the cosmic drama as like through the lens of like system dynamics, the whole cosmos is a living system that God has created essentially, and like what function do the various elements of that system play, right? And so I would grant that there is spiritual dynamics in the system and physical dynamics in the system, and then you have, you know, adversarial dynamics and these kinds of things. What's interesting to me is that both at the level of material substrate of the reality we live in, and then at the spiritual condition of like a potential function that the satanic or the adversarial role plays, is both play an interesting role in falsification of actually establishing the truth and the reality of a thing. Reality does that in a way that's not adversarial. So if you have an idea for a product or an invention or a work of art, your constraint is what's physically possible, right? Like, how can I represent this particular scene on a canvas? How can I take this idea and convert it into, let's say, an automobile or something like that? You're going to have an idea of what's going to work, and then you're going to have to go through an empirical process of figuring out how to make it work in reality, right? So there's a falsification side of it. And similarly, like Satan takes this adversarial role that's, you know, just tied to what his name is, right? As adversarial, is oftentimes we catch like a spiritual vision of things as they are, or who we actually are, and we hit this adversarial kind of pushback that constantly forces us to essentially like really establish and ground ourselves in that truth in order for that to kind of survive like this falsification process. And I'm interested in that side of the imagination, as far as like how what is seen with the mind can then be established in some way in reality. And I'm curious, like, have any of you put any thought into that piece, or have any ideas or responses to that?
Are you talking about like manifestation?
Well, I mean, in a strange way, I suppose that is a subset of a manifestation. Right? Like, how do you take something that is purely mental and convert it into something that appears on the physical plane?
Yeah. So I think
it's magic too. I mean, there's a lot of categories you could list it underneath.
I think I didn't take you to mean something that as radical as that. I took you to mean something like, how do we take something from the realm of imagination and then bring it forth into reality by I didn't take you to be meaning extraordinary means. I took you to be meaning like ordinary means, right?
Right. Yeah. You're gonna have to you have to kind of like, let's say, because I'm working on, you know, some product development. So you're taking an idea and trying to figure out how to make it work. Right. So
I think we have to like. I actually, this is actually what I talked about with. I don't know if Marcus is still hanging out or not, but Marcus and I just finished part 2 of our conversation on Bulgakov's philosophy of economy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the chapters we were going over was Bulgakov's chapter on the nature of science. And Bulgakov is much less. So Bulgakov recognizes the tendency of science to reduce things to mechanism, and he talks about the genuine downsides of science. But Bulgakov ends up circling back around, contra someone like, say, Paul Kingsnorth. And Bulgakov ends up saying that science inevitably serves the kingdom of life and the redemption of the world.
Right.
And that science not only can, but inevitably will eventually be put in the service of Sophia, rather than serving it as an anti-Sophianic force, as it as it has throughout our era often tended to be. So he sees both science and technology, which is the sister of science, as things which are ultimately going to participate in the process of the redemption of the world. So then, to answer your question, well, the way we make sure that the vision stays as close to the divine Sophia as opposed to our own imagination as possible is by taking every step that we can to make sure those things are aligned. And I in that conversation, I do give a few like markers of things that would indicate that we're moving toward that kind of alignment. But I would direct you to that conversation for
I'll have to check it out.
For those points. But I think it's possible. But I think we have. And here's the really simple thing we need to ask. Here's the thing that we always have to be willing to ask. This is the key question. When we're talking about our science and technology, we need to continually be asking, who does this serve? And a problem with a lot of our science and technology is that because of all kinds of complicating factors of our world, our fallen world, with all its illusions and shadow, it's actually very seldom the case. Very seldom the case that it's clear who it serves. It's not even always clearly in the service of man. Oftentimes it seems like sometimes it's only in the service of a particular class of individuals, a very relatively small number of individuals. And what it ends up serving is the increase of their power in this world, which is actually the opposite of what it should be aligning toward. Right? The way we want to align it is we want to align it toward thy kingdom come, thy will be done. That's what we want it to be in the service of. And it's not impossible for it to be in the service of that. But obscuring what it's in the service of is probably the number one thing that needs to be stopped. We need to make who it's serving as transparent as possible. So this is why Vervaeke is so freaked out by LLMs, right? Because it's not, it is a technology where it's super unclear who it's serving or what it's directed toward, or even who's using the technology and who's using the technology and who's being used by the technology. All of those things are super ambiguous in the world of AI and LLMs. So that's why Vervaeke, even though he is a scientist, has this kind of like alarms and cautions. But that doesn't mean we give up on science and technology, right? So,
right. And I feel like that's like I need to spend some more time with Kingsnorth because I haven't read The Machine yet. So my exposure to his sustained arguments are just, from articles and interviews and that kind of stuff. And I'm sympathetic to a lot of his criticisms. I think that they're correct. Mm-hmm. But I think
I agree, by the way.
What gets missed is already fundamentally technology operates in the Sophianic register. It's doing that right now in this conversation. It's facilitating the ability to have the conversation, right?
Right.
It happens at the cross where we crucify our creator with the implements and instruments and technologies of our own hand, either the social technologies of governance or the actual physical substrate of the cross itself. The Eucharist is a technology. It's technologically mediated through an agricultural process, right? Our ability to digest the written word is developed on the supply chains of the publishing industry, however they're distributing the material.
Yeah, I mean,
right? And so it happens bi-directionally. It's not just one thing happening. It's at least two things happening at the same time. Is the technology gets used in both malefic and beneficial ways, right? And
Well,
so the critique of technology is really, it's fundamentally, I think, you know, I mean, I can say this in this setting and other settings that I can't, because I mean, I'm working on AI, but essentially the difference between magic and technology is one of emphasis. And really, it's a question of licit and illicit magic, to me.
Yeah, I agree, actually. And that's why that and by the way, the reduction of things to mechanism is at the core of when science and technology go wrong. Because the reason you want to reduce things to mechanism and to only describe things in terms of their parts is to gain power over them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it all that kind of mechanistic view of the world, and a science that is aligned only with that mechanistic view of the world and doesn't admit the possibility of anything else, is always going to be effectively dark sorcery.
Right. But I think the maybe the more wisdom informed paradigm understanding of technology does not see these things as abstract bolt-ons to the reality that we live within. Exactly, they emerge and grow and evolve, and actually we co-evolve with our tools all the way back to when we were using stone axes and discovering fire. We co-evolve with our technologies. The case is almost ironclad. Like
well, do you see it as part of a living system, or like that's actually the difference, right? So the difference between like a Sophianic science and a Sophianic technology is that still looking at things as a living whole. That's part of it's everything is part of a cosmic organism, right? Mm-hmm. It's everything ultimately is in the service of life. Well, in mechanistic science, everything is rendered dead by necessity, because you have to render it dead before you can study it in that static way as merely a composition of its parts. Like
it's
you autopsy. Have to. It's exactly. It's autopsy. That's exactly right. And so, I think we've outgrown that kind of science already. I think we're already moving away from that. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that I'm not saying that there are no more dangers ahead. There certainly are, but I am not pessimistic. So
yeah. Well, and I think that like the you know, kind of the pictures we get of eschatology, like the New Jerusalem itself indicates something civilizational and technological. It's a city and it's a garden, and it's cultivated space. That means that like mind had to come to bear on whatever the material substrate is to make it what it is. Right.
Yeah, to give up. I mean, honestly, to give up on technology and science is to give up on actually to give up on the idea that we have a role as sub-creators.
Right. And so
there's always exile in Babylon. It was also a very beautiful city, and you know, far beyond its you know, ahead of its time, let's say. But you know, so I don't know, instead of arguing against or arguing for anything, I just like to reserve judgment. Mm-hmm. You know, because the potential, you know, if something is true, its opposite is also true. Mm-hmm. So that just means that you know, we're always at a crossroads and we always have to choose, right?
I think that both Jed and I are arguing in favor of exactly that, though, because both of us are saying that it's open to multiple possibilities,
right?
And that we shouldn't act as if only one outcome is inevitable,
right?
And therefore treat it as something that is only inherently negative,
right?
And has no positive aspect. That's what we're saying,
right? And what I wanted to get at is, let's say you spend all your time looking at a hammer and trying to decide if it's good or bad. Okay, because it's capable of both. You can kill someone with it, or you can build a house, right? Mm-hmm. Why don't you just cultivate the good within you so that you can use that tool for the good and make something beautiful, right? So for me, all of these moments in time that humans are faced with always come down to deciding to what George MacDonald says, go out to worship or stay home to be sensual, right? Those are the things you can do. And so like I said earlier, Christianity for me is a call to holiness. So, and that is a personal thing. What I perceive as my call to holiness is not going to be what any of you decide is your call to holiness. God is going to work in your life in such a way that he's going to point out the things that need to be gone, to get gone in your life. And so this is the dilemma of the one and the many, right? Of the particular and the general.
Do you mind if I say something really quick? Because especially you especially made it strong for me when you referenced the problem of the one and the many.
Mm-hmm.
So when I want to do a little bit of wordplay about when you say holiness, I want people to think of it with a WH. Right?
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
Because that is ultimately what the mark of holiness is you are moving away from your own fragmentation, right, toward the kind of unitive state that I referenced earlier. And that's when in Christian language, what the way we express this, that we talk about being in Christ. That is where you're no longer fragmented. You are in the unitive state. You are in Christ.
Right. And so, if I put it in my farmer language, it looks like this. I'm no longer broken. I am healed.
Yes.
Okay. Which psychologically speaking means I'm no longer fragmented. I am integrated, right? Because that's what healing does. It reintegrates or it reconciles, which is why the fathers speak about apokatastasis, because that's what they're describing.
So let me tell you about my side project. So the side project that I'm working on is a tabletop role-playing game. And it's just working title is just the Grail Country RPG. But the thematic content of what people are doing in the game is they're going out into this fantasy world and they're collecting fragments of the Grail because the Grail has been shattered. So given put that in the context of the conversation that we're having right now, and I think it becomes pretty evident what I'm kind of getting at in that metaphor in the game, right? Ultimately, the Grail that you're seeking the fragments of is your own soul, your own fragmented soul.
Right, because if you are building Jerusalem, Zion, the new Jerusalem, that means that you are a part of the building of it. In other words, you are a brick and you need to be integer. You need to be healed, right? You need to be able to fit into this building that is happening. So yeah, we as human beings, we love to swing very hard on the pendulum from one extreme to the other. So it's either, communism or capitalism, the many over the one, the individual, but it's both of those things, right? Both of those things. And I believe that it's right to know that there is no wholeness until the building material is integrated properly within itself. So, and this is why the contemplative life is really important to me. Because there's no reason for me to work towards building anything with anyone if I'm completely broken, right? I need to know, I need a holiness to my life. So this is why, back to what I said at the beginning, this is why I think that is what our Christian life is. It is a call to holiness, like Nate said, to wholeness, to healing, right? Which is why you say the Jesus prayer in the Orthodox Church, because that is a prayer for healing. So what's really interesting that I ran across recently is that when the word Kyrie eleison is used, Lord have mercy, it is used primarily by sick people asking for physical healing in the scriptures. It's not used to it's not a get out of hell card. Okay. Right? It's like, it's not about, oh, will you pay my debt for me? Will you spare my life? No, it's sick people following Jesus around, asking him to heal them. It's really worth thinking about.
I just wanted to say something about the word sinner, and I think that it's pretty evident that you can see that to be a sinner or to be in sin is the same thing as to say that you are fragmented and divided against yourself. Because if you were not fragmented and divided against yourself, you wouldn't sin.
You know what I like to think of it as, Nate? I like to think of it as a lack of information. Because you're missing the mark. Okay? So you're doing this archery thing and you're not hitting the target. Why wouldn't you hit the target? You just don't have enough information.
Well, yeah, that's because what? Well, because we get distracted, but we get distracted by facts. We get distracted by facts and small t truths, which are also fragmented, right? Facts and small t truths are fragmented. None of them contain the unit of wholeness of truth with a capital T. Right. So even when we're pursuing those things, we're not doing anything to remedy our own fragmentation, which is why Jesus says, I am the truth, capital T truth, because only within Christ, within that ultimate unity of identity, is there any solution to the fragmentation of being a sinner.
Right, but it's not only information in the sense of an archer, right? Where if you're trying to hit the target, you have to train, practice. You have to bring into submission, I guess you could say, your whole body.
Yeah, all the parts of your body have to be completely aligned in the activity.
The way I think about it is, if you just were walking down a path in the woods and you picked up a bow and arrow, you would have to figure out what it was. What is it for? How does it work? How does it work best? What am I supposed to do with this thing, right? That's the kind of information I'm talking about. So, you don't have, you don't have any idea. You found a tool. It's like, I find this. What is this? If I handed this to you, Nate, what would you do with it?
Right.
I know what to do with it because I have the whole picture.
I have no clue.
Okay. I got the whole
That's one of those ab crunchers, right? You put it on the floor. And
you wish.
It's a big awkward top.
But you know what I'm saying? This is what we lack. We don't have the overarching view of what it is that this thing is that we're doing, which is why I keep saying to people, you have to understand the story you are in. And back to Tolkien, imagination, fantasy, the earth, the cosmos, that's the story we're in. Right? So the only way you're going to be able to understand what this thing is for, or the bow and arrow that you find on the path. This is what archaeologists are up against all the time. They're digging up something and they pick it up and they're like, there's no context. That's really what's missing.
I have really enjoyed this conversation this morning, but I do have to go because I have to make myself something to eat, and then the Sooners play in about 30 minutes.
Oh my goodness!
Big game against Alabama, so I'll see y'all later.
That's the idea at the beginning of The Gods Must Be Crazy. Yeah, exactly. When he finds the pop bottle. Bye, Nate. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye. Yep.
See ya.
When he finds the pop bottle and he doesn't know what it's for, And so he does all these things with it that don't make that just seems like total foolishness to us, because we've got the story of a pop bottle. We know what it's for, right? And that's how I like to think of the word sinner. You know, it's like we find this thing and we're trying to make it work, but we don't know, you know, the context in which it's supposed to work, right? So like, and the only place, in my opinion, the only place where we can figure that out is if we pay attention to the world around us, like the one that God created. That's it. The story's being told in everything there. Sorry, Zep, you want to say something?
That's great. I agree. I was just going to say, you know, there was a man I used to know who was really good at that. He just had a way of looking at life that he was able to see God quickly. You know, I remember one day we were cleaning up a barn area to have a youth meeting in, and he had this tool that was just like a long shaft, a long handle with an L-shaped blade on the end, and he was using that to cut down these thick weeds that had grown up. And he would, you know, rake side to side for a few rakes, you know, and then it would get all full, like it would be clogged with all these sticks and really thick fibrous things. And then he would have to lift it up, turn it sideways, and shake it. They would fall out, and then he could go back to work. And then we were just standing there, and he goes, "Oh, this is kind of how we are with God sometimes." And he raked it back and forth, cut some of the leaves that got all clogged. He lifted it up, shook it out, and said, "Sometimes he has to let us, or we have to let him shake all our sticks out." And I just thought, wow, to be able to have that kind of like sacramental, almost imaginative vision when you're cutting down weeds, you know, that really kind of spoke to me in a way that wasn't necessarily about what he said, but the fact that he could do that, and it was just there at his fingertips, so to speak. You know, I really admired that. I think it's a little kind of like what you're saying, where use the imagination and see what's really there.
Go out to worship.
And
go out to worship. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, there's
into a t-shirt.
there's an interesting like kind of parallel of some of the things that you guys are swirling around here to I constantly, I reference this in conversations a lot, but the problem of imperfection and fracture, and that it poses to us, you know, both in our creative enterprise and the great work that we're all called to participate in. But so I see like the kintsugi art is kind of in this iconographic sort of way.
Sacramental.
Right. There's you know, like Julian of Norwich talks about in her showings, the behoveliness of sin. Actually, Jesus talks about it to her and says all sin is behovely. It's fitting. It's a part of the normal aspect of our existence. And he reassures her that all shall be well and all manner of things shall be well. Right. And I look at that kintsugi piece, and what's interesting is that what it suggests to me is that there is an inherent perfectibility that has to admit imperfection in order to attain its final perfected state. Like that piece of kintsugi ceramics is, in a sense, re-perfected and elevated through its fracturing into.
Well, and the thing is,
that final state.
Yeah, and it becomes stronger.
Right.
It becomes
So the
more resilient.
The fracture is a part of the whole truth of a thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's a part of its story. And so like I had a night where, you know, Zep, I don't know you very well, but I tend to be highly imaginative, and I have very
Cool.
interesting contemplative experiences as a result. So I was doing a deep dive on, Zen aesthetics and Kintsugi artwork and just kind of studying it and absorbing it for a while. And I was sitting down, I was contemplating it, and kind of this vision of the New Jerusalem pops in my mind, but in a very interesting way, right? Is I started to look at, the city that's described in terms of it's clear like glass, but it shines like gold. And I kind of zoom into these different bricks into that house, right? And they were like these glass bricks, and they looked like they had this gold pattern through fracture lines in them. And what it looked like they had happened is that they had been dropped and then put back together in that same Kintsugi fashion. I was asking the Lord in the contemplation, what am I seeing? He says, well, that brick is you. Like that's you in your final perfected state. And you're in this assemblage basically where the whole apparatus of the New Jerusalem is the people of God in some way. And that our stories, in their completed state, still bear the marks of the fracture, but the higher perfection that was achieved as a result of that fracture, right? And so it was an interesting contemplative experience that gave me a sense of kind of, again, back into that problem of the one, the many. To be firmly established in the many is to experience that fracture, and then the experience of oneness is that reintegration into the holism that was envisioned at the very beginning.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know why, but I keep thinking about the adversary and opponent processes, and how an opponent process can help define a boundary, right? And maybe without an opponent process, it would be difficult to find a boundary. Even you could take that even to like a manufacturing space.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, but then you could apply that to a person and maybe even sin, where there's a weird, like you had said, there's almost a weird fittedness to each sin that we individually struggle with. And if you're able to overcome that, there can be a new unity, right? Still bear the marks. And then that could be, that can make you stronger and be able to become that stronger brick. I don't know if that
Well,
makes any sense.
when I was 21 years old, I had this really bizarre experience where I was walking across my cabin with an armload of laundry. And I had been asking the question, why did God put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden? Just asking it to myself, asking God, asking people that I thought would know the answer. And I got really, really frustrated when I started asking, and these were people who were guest lecturers at the school I was going to at the time. And they would just say, oh, good question. And I was like, yeah, this is, it was really bothering me. Like, I just thought, you guys are just avoiding my freaking question. You haven't even, you got to think about it, think about it. And that's what I was doing. I was just thinking obsessively about this. And then one day I'm just not thinking about it at all. And suddenly I have this moment where it's just boom. And a lot of things, I kind of lost track of time. It was milliseconds, but it felt like forever. And when I came to myself, I was sitting on the floor and I didn't even notice it happening. But I had this, it was a lot, but basically what it was everything had to be broken so that it could be healed. And I remember saying, why does it need to be healed? Because it's stronger when it's healed. That was the word I had, right? And then, I don't know, 40 years later, I end up in the little corner of the internet and I meet a Orthodox Jewish guy and he tells me about the shattered vessels. Okay. Which is like Kabbalah. So, the divine enters into these light and enters in, it shatters them because it's too big to be carried. And the role of the people of Israel is to collect, or all the people, humanity, is to collect those shards of light and bring them back. But they're broken. They're also broken. Okay. And then I hear about kintsugi and and I'm just like, and these are my confirmations because I don't know what happened to me that day. Like, I'm not going to go around telling people this is theology and this is the way it is. And God said, but I knew it was true because like Nate and I were talking about earlier, I was reasoning with God because I was in that very short period of time, I had a conversation. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why does it have to be healed? And he said, because it makes it stronger. And then there was a thing about redemption. What does redemption mean? When something is redeemed, it's taken from a lowly state and it's made transcendent, right? It transcends its original state, right? When it's redeemed, right? All this kind of thing. So,
well, and you see that in our personal lives too.
Right. And then I find out that, Lord have mercy, is sick people running behind Jesus going, heal me, heal me, heal me. It's the same thing. It's kintsugi. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is the good news, right? Mm-hmm. That we're not caught up in some kind of karmic samsara. Is that what they call it, Jed? Right? Yeah. This like repetitive wheel of, psychological torture, basically, where it just keeps repeating all the suffering, everything, And I think we sense this in our own lives as we age and we get retrospect and we can look back, we can see how we were broken in order to be healed, in order to become more resilient. And nature teaches us that. You look at trees that are wind blown and weathered and, I got a really old Douglas fir on my property. It's burnt all up, and all the trees around it are dead because now there's water in that area, but it's still alive. Like this tree has wisdom because it's been made resilient through adversity. Mm-hmm. It's been broken. Right.
Right. And so that connects, Sherry, to like the earlier question I had about falsification. Right. So the physical trials that the tree endures, the adversarial conditions that it has to grow through and within, prove the tree to be what it is. Right. In some sense. All these adversarial things, fire, maybe.
Yeah, reveal its true name.
A couple of winters that are too dry, a couple of winters that are too wet. Yeah. It's got it has a lot of less than ideal conditions. And in fact, all life kind of grows this way. It's never under ideal conditions. It's always under significant constraint, boundary conditions, like you're talking about, right? We have to deal with the boundary at all times, but the boundary is actually a condition of activity as well. It just constrains what directions you can generate and you can grow within. And so when we look at the at like that broader picture of like that problem of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, I was reading, I think it was in Tomberg with the world card. I could be wrong though. I could have been reading in the Florensky book you sent me, Sherry. But it talks about kind of this dual problem of knowledge, right? And I think it was Tomberg actually, but dual problem of knowledge, right? So the Eastern answer to that in the Dharmic traditions is that the problem of knowledge is one of ignorance. We don't know. and that's correct. It's just
Right.
not the complete picture. Is then we have the problem of in the garden of this illicit use of knowledge that was preceded by ignorance. Eve was ignorant, but she still like acquires knowledge illicitly. And Tom
She
Berg, I think,
doesn't actually. But here's the thing, Jed. Like I've been thinking about this for so many years. But she actually doesn't. She only thinks she does because she took from the tree. Okay? She's like, I did. Now,
Mhm.
because look, I ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But what happens next? She gets barred from the garden because she doesn't have it. She doesn't know the difference. Just like the Eastern tradition that you mentioned talks about, right?
right. Well, how Tom Berg resolves it is he talks about the illicit use of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, knowledge that we all need, because it basically tells us how things work and how things don't. Is that the way that it's used licitly in the way he describes it is he pictures Christ as the one who is crucified upon that tree.
Right.
And
But
so,
ultimately, you can't really, it's not obvious. Like, so this goes back to, the wisdom of God is foolishness to men. Okay. So you don't actually see it. It's the same as missing the mark.
mhm.
It's the same as picking up that bow and arrow on the path and you don't know what it's for, or finding some archaeological tool that was, from 16,000 years ago, right? If it isn't obvious, we don't have a context for it. So we can't see it. And, in Job chapter 28 it's the wisdom poem. And what's interesting about that is that you actually can't see it. You can't. He goes through all these descriptions of like, the eagle flies over and he can't see it from the air, and all these different animals. The lion can't sniff it out in the woods, and man digs up the earth and turns it over, but he can't find it. Right? Wisdom is not something that is superficial. It is just deep, and it is buried. And the only way to get to it is through the fear and awe of God. And that's only the beginning. That's what it says at the end. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And so like this, to me, this goes back to that poet means maker in George MacDonald's Imagination essay, when he says, that uses the French word trouver. We're finding, right? We're seekers. That's what we're doing. And that's why Jesus says, if you seek, you will find it. This is an ongoing thing. If you seek this, you will find it. No, it doesn't say that. It says, if you seek, you will find. So you're always in that process of seeking and finding. It's seeking and finding. And then I find out that in Judaism, God is essentially playing hide and seek with us in creation. Okay? Like there literally is nothing new under the sun. It's just not.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a sense where like our ignorance is always going to be far in excess of our knowledge. And I think there is a very coherent way of arguing that we don't ever know anything fully. Like any particular thing is, to know the thing is to know it in its fullness. So it could just be as simple as this pen.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think pen, that's it. That's what it is. But I'm not thinking about the manufacturing processes, the supply chain, the human stories of how this was put together, how it was conceived of. There's more that's going on with this pen than what I see typically. I just see pen and scribble notes, and that's what my typical process is. But to really know what that thing is like an invitation into like a mysterious regress that goes all the way back to the Big Bang and before it, the words of God that uphold it all.
Mm.
Right. So we don't really know anything. So ignorance is our primordial state, is not
Right,
one of
which is
knowledge.
why I said missing the mark is a lack of information. It's ignorance.
Right. And
You
that's,
know?
I mean, that's a very much like, I think that there's the two-edged side of it, though, that I think that the Western inflection brings to us is that our ignorance is both innocent and guilty, a kind of ignorance. You know, and so like we have a sense where we'll find that something is useful to us and we'll make use of it regardless of the consequences, and even some sort of knowledge. Like Eve had the knowledge that this is some way going to kill me if I take this fruit, right? I'm going to die if I take this fruit. Knowledge of a negative consequence does not inhibit us from making a bad decision. I know.
Yeah, I always wondered though, like if, because the serpent said to her, you know, you'll be like God, right? He corrected her. Like he's, you know, she's kind of like, well, we're, you know, if we eat from it, we'll die. No, you be like God. And, you know, they're wandering with God in the cool of the evening, right? In the garden. And they have this innocent, childlike relationship to God because they've had no adversity. Okay, so they're really like greenhouse plants. Like put them out in the weather, they're going to wither and die, really. And along comes the snake. Now that's the other thing. Who put the snake in the garden? Right? But so she says to him, you know, well, we'll die. And then he says, no, you'll be like God. And she thinks that's a good thing because God is good. You know, I listened to Joe Rogan and Elon Musk recently, and I there was a huge takeaway for me at the end of that. Elon Musk said, and it's right at the very end, actually, maybe the last 3 minutes. The whole thing I liked, but at the very end, he said, you know, what's really interesting with this AI thing, if everything goes well, huge caveat there. He said, is that capitalism will actually usher in communism. And then he said, fate is an irony maximizer. And I thought, this is why we don't know anything, Jed. Because we think we know what's going to happen next, but it flips, it inverts, right? Is what happens. It flips right up. It's kind of like, you know, that duck dipping thing.
Oh yeah.
Or that bird thing, you know, it's been around for 100 years. But it's like that thing just goes whoop, you know, and flips right upside down. And we think it's going to stay like this, but now it's ass end up, right? And we don't know how it happened. He's so right about that. That's really been my life experience, is that, you know, just a brief example. I knew some people who came from really rough backgrounds, and both families, like the bride and the groom, both of their parents were divorced. They hated divorce. They were angry about divorce because, you know, messed up their lives. They stood up and when they said their vows, they made speeches about divorce and never getting divorced, right? They served God. They went to church. They got involved in the charismatic movement. They went to the Toronto Blessing, and suddenly they're sleeping with everyone around them, swapping wives, and you know, and they end up divorced. And not only that, but now they've ruined their best friends' families because they're sleeping with their best friends' spouses. And, you know, and then those best friends go and do that with and the whole domino thing just, right? Fate is an irony maximizer, man. I'm telling you, it just is. Like, And then sometimes you run from evil, or you run into it, what's so-called evil,
Mhm.
you know, and turns people into saints. You know what I mean? It's insane. We don't know anything.
Well, I think that's like, Socrates was the wisest man that ever lived, or was said to be the wisest man that ever lived, and he claimed to know nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like his whole method was predicated not on answers but on questions.
Questions. Right.
Right. And I mean, I think it's some, you kind of you read, Plato's renderings of Socrates, and you get a sense where there's a little bit of tongue in cheek there, because obviously Socrates is brilliant, but like he has the right starting point, which is, I really actually don't know anything.
Yeah, but if you ask people questions, you never know what they're going to say. Maybe
Right.
that's what he's talking about, right?
Right.
Were you going to say something, Zep?
Well, I was just thinking about what you said, how we don't know anything. And even it goes so far as to, even after a thing has happened and you know the chain of events, you still don't know why or how. I mean, we write history books and people write history books that conflict. Well, how can that be? Well, we still don't know anything about things that have already happened. I just wanted to accentuate your point, Sherry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Donald Hoffman, do you guys follow him at all?
I know of him, and
He
I've heard
shows
some
up
of
on
his
like
work.
Kurt Jamungel's channel, and he's
Yeah.
like into cognitive science, and his idea is that, like, essentially, like, what we see is kind of an operating interface. It's really, we're not seeing reality, we're seeing our interface's rendering of that reality. So your eyes are not seeing like subatomic activity, your eyes are seeing basically things in their classical reality form. And he makes an interesting point. He says, like, if we were really to truly see the whole world, the real world as it is, he says it would probably just physically kill us, because we can't process that level of information and reality. And his sense is like, he has this interesting kind of scientific way of describing what Gregory of Nyssa talks about as epictasis, this everlasting outstretching growth into this transcendent reality. And Donald Hoffman has the same thing. Is like, he says, well, no, he says there's going to be a certain aspect of reality that we're never going to know empirically. Like, there's always going to be a remainder there's always going to be an excess that we won't know, at least in that rational way. I think that this is where, like, to tie it back though into the imagination, because the imagination is not tightly coupled with our rational faculties, they interact, right? An irrational imagination will lead to things that could be problematic, but like, imagination does not always operate on the rules of rationality. Is a lot of times what the imagination is kind of is kind of like our ability to seek out reality, to enter into the manifold that reality presents to ourselves, and to, in some sense, guess. And what happens though is, like, in the realm of science, is that those guesses just turn out to be right and convertible into classical reality. That's all. But there's a whole lot of stops and starts in that field. But the imagination is actually what enables us to navigate a world where we will never possess perfect knowledge. And so
be okay with that.
Right.
Because it's like,
we need to get comfortable in the cleft of the rock.
Well, it's like Christmas morning as a kid. Everything is to be discovered. Once it's been discovered, you're bored.
Yep.
Then you got to go order it. You got to put it on your shelf in a certain spot. And, yeah. So, I mean, come on. If we're playing hide and seek with God and we're finding, and here's the other thing, Jordan Daniel Wood said to me, the word invention, I don't know what it is in Latin, inventare or something like that, actually means to discover. So It's not like, when we say invent, it's like, oh, he made that up himself. It's
Yeah,
ex
sort of
nihilo. Ex nihilo for
Right.
the guy,
Right.
right? But no, he just discovered a principle that already existed. It was hidden to him, right? So, we have, this is a fantastic life that we have ahead of us. Like, but we have to go out to worship, and we can't impose ourselves on it, right? And then it will reveal itself to us. It's like how it is with my animals, my sheep. I've got this thing going on right now because I didn't buy them, but my neighbor gave me 2 more sheep, and I've discovered that my sheep are racist. So all my sheep have black faces, and the 2 new sheep are from England, and they're white as a ghost. And my sheep are just like terrified. Okay, so I've got, and the new sheep are like 6 months old. They're tiny little babies. And so I've got 16 of my sheep that are like 5 and up in age. And they're running away like a flock, absolutely panicked with these 2 little babies running behind them.
That sounds pretty comical.
And if I try to talk them into it, it just intensifies the whole thing. If I try to impose my will on that scenario, it just turns to a gong show. So I have to walk away. I can't impose myself on it, right? I have to walk away, and I have to let them sort it out. And
There's a proper participation.
yeah, and really my presence has to be like normal, okay? So I have to go there. I have to act as if everything's normal. I'm going to feed them. I'm going to shovel. I'm not going to flinch. I'm not going to look nervous. I'm not going to look down at them. I'm not going to look at them in any special way. Just going to do a normal day. And then when I'm normal, they're all normal. They're like, oh, this is normal. We're in normal now,
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I start looking at it like special, oh, it just makes the whole thing worse, Yeah. And believe me, I tried. I locked them in a tiny little pen. They were like crashing into me and them and, breaking stuff.
Wow.
And now they're getting along because I left them alone for like 4 days, and I acted normal. Yeah. Anyway, I should go, you guys. I've been here for almost 2.5 hours. So, and speaking of which, I have to get out there and we had snow last night.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
We're getting hit with like a nice heavy rainstorm today here in Southern California. We don't get too many of those in November.
That's pretty unusual, huh?
Yeah.
Where are you at, Zeb?
I'm in Ohio. It's just a little windy and kind of chilly today, but no snow. We had some snow the other day, but not too bad.
It's okay, Evgeny. Next time. We went.
Well, thanks for having me, Sherry.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
nice.
good to meet you. Yeah.
Zep, it was a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so glad you jumped on, Jad.
Yeah. Always fun to hang out with the Grail Country crew. So
Yeah. Good. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us, everybody who watched, and have a great weekend. Bye.
bye.
Bye.